Every Tuesday we head to the US to find out what's happening in Washington. Katy Balls is the Washington editor at The Times and Sunday Times, and she joins me now. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let's begin with the ongoing conflict in Iran. Talks for a peace agreement were scheduled to resume today, according to Donald Trump, but Iran has said that it has no plans to negotiate with the US, and it was talking to Oman instead. Writing on Truth Social, the president said, the Iranian leadership is unbelievably duplicitous. They asked for a meeting, some would say beg, talks to begin. He added that nothing will get through, i.e. the Strait of Hormuz, unless a deal or total surrender is accomplished. I'm slightly exhausted, Katy, talking about the ongoing peace negotiations between Trump and Iran. What's the latest?
Well, as you say, it does feel a little bit like we're going in circles here, in the sense that you have periods where Donald Trump will say that he is incredibly angry with Iran and he can't negotiate and they're awful people, and he'll threaten various things. So, for example, the latest was over the weekend. We were hearing briefings from both sides about how the US could work with Israel for a large attack on Iran. And yet he many times seems to walk back from the brink and effectively say, actually, we're going to hold fire here because we think there is progress. And I think listening to what's been said, and again, just as I think people are going a little bit wary of what Donald Trump is saying, I also wouldn't take everything the Iranian side say as, truth. I don't think that we can take the Iranian regime saying there are no negotiations as, something that is definitely the case. But clearly, we're once again at the Strait of Hormuz and what's happening there. And I think the thing is, if there was a deal between Iran and Oman on how to navigate that could be the beginnings of an agreement with the US. So I think two things can be true at once. If they agree something on the Strait and then take that to the US, that could be progress. But I think the ultimate thing here is it's just not clear every time that Donald Trump is angry at Iran that he is willing to take the steps to escalate this, that some on his side think you need to do to take this war to a new place, whether that is escalation for a full-scale war or escalation in order to agree something, which means that you can make progress.
I mean, I also saw that Trump sort of has lashed out at the oil companies because obviously, we just heard about BP's results. All the oil companies, the US ones, I assume, are reporting bumper profits. And he's basically saying, use your profits to bring gas prices down. That's the real sword of Damocles that's hanging over his head.
Yes, and we know that when it comes to the midterm elections in November, and you hear various things, there are some around Trump who say, oh, well, he doesn't actually really care about the midterms and how the Republicans could do very badly. And if anything, his team would like him to care more. But certainly, if you look at what Donald Trump said around the time that they agreed the Memorandum of Understanding, which was when it felt as though this was moving to a place where Iran and the US worked together. And that now seems a long time ago. But when you look at it, one of the justifications he gave for signing a piece of paper that upset many of his own side, more of the Republican hawks, was effectively that he didn't want to go down in history as a US president who had sparked a depression. And therefore, the economic factor here is clearly weighing on his mind and his advisors' minds.
And I wonder, we see all this at one remove. I mean, when you have a quiet coffee or drink with a Maga sympathiser in private, do they sort of tear their hair out and just say, how long can we go on like this? Or are they just kind of blasé?
So I think it's interesting in DC, quite a lot of the MAGA side on this have almost switched off from the wall. When it was first launched, you would have, many, there are obviously those who work directly for Trump. There are those who are in his sphere, and some of those are MAGA influencers who have their own shows. And they were covering this pretty closely. And obviously, step by step, they said the audience are very interested in the war, even if they didn't like it. Now, I think a lot of people have just switched off. They are almost acting like the war is not happening. But where that is being felt is, of course, in people's pockets. But I would say some MAGA sympathizers are almost just trying to look the other way when it comes to the Iran war at the moment.
Now, it's a fascinating kind of rows going on within the administration. There's the US Attorney Jeanine Pirro, who dropped vandalism charges, which were originally pressed against a former Olympic athlete for vandalising the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. In fact, it's worth hearing what Trump had to say about her.
I was disappointed with Jeanine Pirro, really disappointed with Jeanine Pirro. She folded like an umbrella, and people get away with things, and it's a disgrace.
So, I mean, really strong words there. There's also the ongoing saga of nominating a new Attorney General, a man called Todd Blanche. But let's start with Jeanine Pirro. I mean, Trump has left her swinging in the wind.
Yeah, and I think there's actually a link on both of them because Jeanine Pirro's role obviously crosses into law and order, and then you have the Attorney General. And one of the areas where Trump has the strongest opinions is ultimately retribution, vengeance when it comes to those he thinks have wronged him. And that was one of the reasons Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General, was pushed out. There was a frustration that she wasn't doing enough to get at Trump's enemies, and he was impatient at the lack of progress before Todd Blanche come in. Then you get Jeanine Pirro, who you mentioned, and the rub here gets back to the reflecting pool. It's one of Donald Trump's many vanity projects whereby he is trying to change the appearance to make DC beautiful again. But each project becomes very controversial. There are all these vandalism issues because it became a Trump project, and therefore his foes, his enemies, stepped in. And Jeanine Pirro dropped the cases, the pool vandalism cases, and this has really angered Donald Trump, who did not know that she was going to do this, he claims. And therefore in Washington at the moment, there's questions of how long does she have in the job? Will she be sacked? Will she choose to move on? And yet he hired her to great acclaim, I think less than a year ago, as one of his close friends. So I think it shows you how in Trump world, even though second term is a little bit more functional than first term, if you don't please the master, you can go from being one of his favorite colleagues or people who work for him to one that is on the edge of being pushed out.
I was at least pleased to see that Jeanine Pirro was prepared to follow the law. There was a sort of bleak moment of light there. With all this, this should be absolute field day for the Democrats. You've written about democratic socialism. The Democrats are having their own revolution, the poster person being Zohran Mamdani, the new New York mayor. My instinct is they've sort of formed a circular firing squad and are pulling chunks out of each other. Is that right, or is there something in democratic socialism that will give the Democrats a route back to power?
So I would say probably the jury is out a little bit on where exactly some of these things are going. But certainly, as you say, the Republicans are doing very badly when it comes to Donald Trump's polling, when it comes to voters' views on the economy, and the Iran war is not making that helpful. So it should, in a way, be an open goal for the Democrats when it comes to the midterms in November. There are some who think that on a good day, the Democrats could take back both the House and the Senate. That would completely change Donald Trump's, final 2 years of his term. Think about investigations into his family, into spending, possible impeachment trial, but there are lots of Democrats who think that would be a bad idea. It's worth pointing out. But the question here is you have all these DSA candidates and you have some key primaries. There's the Michigan primary today, Tuesday, and the DSA candidates tend to be to the left. The actual candidates themselves tend to focus more on domestic policies, so Medicaid for all, private healthcare, being against, obviously, trying to crack down on it and to expand the benefit. And also things like, for example, I was just in Wisconsin, where there is a candidate, Francesca Hall, and she's talking about public grocery stores for all and this type of thing. The actual DSA manifesto has things like abolish the Senate, defund the police, end most prisons in it. You hear that less when these candidates are trying to campaign to win. But if you have enough DSA candidates picked as the official Democratic Party candidates, it does raise a question of, first off, does it make it harder for the Democrats to win some of these key races in November? That's the fear of some centrist Democrats. And secondly, if those Democrats are wrong and these DSA candidates are selected and then they win as the official candidate, what flavor does that mean you have in Congress if the Democrats take back control? Do you have a new version of the squad, which is what AOC, the Congresswoman, led, whereby, a faction to the left of the consensus pushes the party into certain places on positions and also influences who the candidate is in 2028. So it's a really interesting story at the moment in terms of the direction the party's going to go in.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining us. That's Katy Balls, Washington editor at The Times and Sunday Times.